Welcome back everybody to another episode of Best Bud Growers 101. Today we're going to touch into your nutrients for your plants and get a little bit more detailed for you. I mentioned it back in another video but didn't get too detailed. I said I would come back and touch up for them. So for your plant's life cycle, you have three main stages. You have your veg stage, you have your early flowering and late flowering stages. During those three stages, the nutrient values that you need for your plants change. Your basic nutrients for your plants are your NPKs. Now, if you notice, those are not in alphabetical order. N stands for nitrogen, P stands for phosphate, and the K stands for potassium. So they go in order with the three stages of your plant's life. So in your early veg stage, your whole veg stage, you're going to want more nitrogen. That's going to really help your plant grow vertically. And then in your early flowering stage, you're going to want more phosphate. And in your late flowering stage, which is pretty much 80% of your flowering stages, you're going to want more potassium. Potassium is a huge food source for your buds. If you want to go good, strong, healthy nugs, get good yields, you're going to want those potassiums. So here's a little bit of what I use so you know what values you're giving. You're going to want all three NPKs for the most part during your stages of your plant's life, except for me personally, I don't like to use nitrogen in my late flowering stages. I do a little bit in the early flowering stages for about the first 3 weeks, and then I like to cut it out and switch just to phosphate and potassium, and then I'll eventually cut those out and I'll flush it out. Because if you continue to use those NPKs, even with my organic natural fertilizers, you can kind of mix your buds a little chemically tasting, I guess it would be the word to use. I don't like it. I don't like it. And if you see a lot of professional growers, they do the same thing. Like they'll use something like a molasses and stuff to help give it some natural NPKs and give it that really good sweet taste and smell. But for the most part, you really want to flush all that stuff out. You don't want those you don't want a lot of nitrogen, phosphate, or potassium in your last 2 weeks of your flowering stage. You want to flush that out. So here's your basic NPK values. They are presented on whatever you buy. This is what I love, down to earth. This is really good stuff here, guys. It's an all natural fertilizer. It's organic. You don't have to use that. If you want to use something else, I can recommend Humboldt Nutrients. They seem really good. I've seen some other people use for an organic one. It's supposed to be organic. It doesn't say it on the box, but I bought it. Is this stuff here. It's Technoflora Recipe for Success. This one comes with a lot of different things, and I really like it. So it allows me to, it's got a lot of different NPK values in all of these, and it allows me to adjust it. So your NPK values are represented on the front of your box. You got your NPK, nitrogen, phosphate, potassium. So this is your basic number, 731, that's on your box. This is a little low for your potassium. I would prefer something like 734. Even then though, when I start out my plants, I don't like to start out that high. I like to slowly introduce my plants into their nutrients. So I've explained to you guys before, I start my plants right in their pots. I don't transplant. It causes root restrictions. It causes stress from transplanting. So I don't like to do that. I like to avoid that. I just plant right in it. But my soil, I mix kelp meal, worm castings, and blood meal with my soil. So it's got a lot of NPK values in it. And I don't want my plant to have it at the start of their life. So I'll make a red solo cup size hole, and I'll use just plain black potting soil with no NPK values, and that's what I'll start my plant in. So that way when its roots start to grow out past that red solo cup perimeter that I made, it'll slowly start to introduce itself to those NPKs, because even when the roots first hit it, majority of the roots, 98% of the roots, are still going to be with 0 NPKs. And so just those tips are going to be sucking in some of those NPKs, and then the more it grows, the more it's going to start to absorb more NPKs. And then when I go to start introducing my water mixture NPKs, I even slowly start to introduce those so I don't overwhelm my plant. Like this here says 1 to 2 for the liquid preparation, 1 to 2 tablespoons per gallon of water, let steep for 48 hours. So this is really important, 48 hours with agitating it, which means shake it up a lot. I keep mine in my tent. I take them out for my videos, but I put them in my tent so that way they're the same temperature as my roots. I want that water, when I pour it in there, it not to shock my plants. And your grow lights produce a lot of heat. So there's going to be a big temperature difference probably between your grow lights tent and outside your tent. With me, my house is usually about 68 degrees. Well, my grow tent, like right now, it's at 77, which I've said before is really about perfect. That's where I personally like it. The best range during veg stage is 71 degrees to 82 degrees. And so 76, 77 is like right there in the middle. My humidity isn't where I normally like to keep it. It should be between 40 and 70. So 55 is about perfect where I was keeping it. But then my autoflower started flowering, and 50 is really pushing it on the humidity because you don't want mold. So anyways, back to my water jugs. I want them to be the same temperature, especially if you keep them on the floor or if you put them on top of your fridge. You know, there's going to be a hot air rises, cool air settles. So your jugs are going to be a different temperature, and you can pour it in there and it can shock them a little bit. So I keep them in my tent. So what I do is just slowly start to introduce them is I will take that 2 tablespoons that it has here, and I will cut it by 4 to do a half a tablespoon for the first watering. And then on the second one, I'll increase it to 1 tablespoon. And then the final one, I'll give it 2 tablespoons just to get it up to par. And then from there, that's going to give me my basic 731. And then I'm going to start using my Technoflora for Success recipe for success. And I'm going to start giving it things that's going to help up those. Like this here, this is a 136. So I'll cut that mixture in half and get like a 1.5 and a 3 to help up these. Bring these phosphate and potassium up, and a little bit on the nitrogen. I will probably get my nitrogen up to like a 9 or a 10. My phosphate up to a 6. And my potassium up to an 8 before I flower. That's probably about how high I will get. Then from there, I'm going to switch to my early flowering stages. Now there, I don't like a lot of nitrogen. As I've said before, and probably previous videos, you know, when it comes to indica, which is what these two are, they're 90% indica. Indicas tend to be more of a dense nug. Now over here I have sativa, and they tend to be a little bit more stringier buds, and they don't have as dense of nugs. So this one here is 70%, 30%, so it'll still kind of get that denseness. But nitrogen helps your plant grow vertically. So if you give it a lot of nitrogen in the flowering stages, those buds are going to grow really tall and stringy. And that probably increases your yields, but you're going to have stringy buds, and I don't like that. So I only give my plant during its flowering, early flowering stages, nitrogen 3 times. And I keep it at like a 1, and then I'll keep it at a 2, and then I'll transfer it back to a 1, and then I'll cut down to a 0 and cut nitrogen out completely. I won't give my plant any nitrogen pretty much for the whole flowering stage, late flowering stage. Only early flowering stages just to kind of help promote bud growth and help kickstart it, but then I cut it out and I get rid of it. So once in early flowering stages, it'll be like, you know, like a 164, a 174 on the NPK scales. And then about 2-3 weeks in, you're starting to notice bud growth, you'll start to notice your white hairs start growing. That's when you're going to really up your potassium and cut that nitrogen out. My potassium will probably get up to like an 8, and I mean my phosphate will get up to like an 8, and my potassium is probably going to get up to a 12. Now some growers will say that's a little high, but you got to remember, I do low stress bending. So instead of having one main cola, like this guy here still has one main cola because I haven't started him yet, I bend him down like the one in the back, and now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 main colas that are growing up. And then here in about a month, when those get really tall and big, I'll bend them down, and those 8 main colas will start like 16 to 24 main colas, and then those will grow up, and then I'll bud them. And that's going to really increase bigger yield. So my plant's going to need a lot more food than as to an average grower that just lets them grow up directly. So that's a big part of your NPKs, and your values is going to depend on your growth style. And sometimes for some of you it might be trial and error, but I usually just start small and I'll just work my way up during the veg stage with higher nitrogen, lower phosphate, a little bit higher potassium. Then you got your early flowering stages, which is pretty much barely any nitrogen, a higher phosphate and a lower potassium. And then your late flowering stages, no nitrogen, a good amount of phosphate, and a really good amount of potassium. Potassium is really going to feed your plant during its vegetative flowering stages. So there's a little bit of a touch up on your NPKs. I really recommend this stuff if you want to be an organic grower. This stuff here I read online that somebody said that yes, it is an organic mixture. And from the looks of it, the stuff that I'm pouring out, it looks like it's an organic material, an organic nutrients. But I really haven't been able to find anything on the site or the box to say that it's organic. So that, I don't know. I keep looking and double checking. But if this stuff is organic, and if it's not organic and I'm using it, I guess this round I'm not an organic grower. I'm still going to keep looking into that. And if I find out that it's not organic, especially on the site itself, I'm not going to use it anymore. But for now, from what I've read, it is organic. And so we're going to keep using it. So I recommend Down to Earth. Get a bunch of different NPK values. Get this. It's got a bunch of different NPK values. And then you can mix and just kind of just slowly increase it. Every time you water it, give it a little bit more nitrogen and phosphate and potassium every time, whichever your mixture is, whichever one's higher. And then 2 weeks before flowering, before it's done flowering, I flush it out. I get rid of all my NPKs. I don't want it to be chemically, but I will give it this. It's called Sugar Daddy. It's supposed to make your buds taste a lot better. So there's your basic NPK value, guys. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I got a triple auto XL over here, which is 90% indica. And then I got a super lemon haze over here, which is 70% sativa. You're gonna wanna see how these bad boys turn out. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and be sure to stay tuned for more episodes.